Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21 and Enfield Climate Action Forum. And today we're going to be talking to Peter Barry. Now, Peter's really interesting because he's developed a project in Cockfosters called Space Generators, and it's part of a sort of wide network of climate emergency centres. And that's really an important thing to do to get people involved. They try to get communities involved and people involved. They do a whole series of amazing things, and we're going to talk to Peter about that today. So, Peter, welcome to the webinar today, and it's great to have you here. And if I can ask you, first of all, so people know who you are, can you tell us very briefly, not too long, because I know you've got a huge background, but if you could tell us briefly just a little about your background.
Well, hi, Francis. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for the welcome. My background, I've been setting up eco community centres for about 30 years, since the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. Our group back then felt that not enough was being done maybe by the mainstream governments, and we all need to pull together and do citizens initiatives really to create community and environmental spaces. So yeah, for a lot of years we've been working on that. For the last 7 years, I set up a charity. About 7 years ago, a group of us set up Space Generators, which was basically to facilitate getting these spaces for environment and community projects, particularly focusing on solutions is one of the things we like to do.
Okay, well, let's talk about those spaces in a minute. But I mean, when did your passion for climate change begin? When did you become sort of involved in it, sort of emotionally and intellectually?
Well, really, I suppose taking it back to the earliest bits was probably Twyford Down, whereas I was involved with Twyford Down road protest back in the 90s, and a massive green movement appeared around those times and sprung up all across the country, and got involved with groups that were passionate about what was going on for the environment. I think it took another 10 years for more of the climate conversation to solidify, shall we say, and I've been involved with about 7 different waves of the environmental movement that have been campaigning on a lot of different issues, from human rights to civil rights to environmental rights. And I've been a community organizer all that time. So I've had, spaces where groups come together and meet. But I suppose that was the early inspiration. And, we get inspired by many different groups and what's being done around the world. And we cross-pollinate, I suppose, ideas and things. And that's why we need these community spaces.
Yeah, well, I certainly know you cross-pollinate because you work with lots of groups, and that's great. And you've helped set up these climate emergency centres. Now, for people who don't know what are they exactly?
So a climate emergency centre in a nutshell is an eco community centre. They're about being community led. The idea is when you get these spaces, you can have meetings that the community can feed into, like people's assemblies or other meetings, where that can go both into the central organising circle of coordinators and also out to the local council. I can go into it a bit later. There's been quite a bit of success with groups working with their council to feed in information from the local community. They're also about focusing on solutions and getting these solutions out there onto the high street in different places. And they're also about being an active part of a network. It's all very well having one centre in one city, but there's now about 21 climate emergency centres all across the country. They're all autonomous and independent, but they're part of a network, and we ask that the groups, actually help each other with skills, ideas, documents, and help upscale and accelerate new groups to getting these spaces. So it's about being an active part of a network.
So it's part of a network principle rather than a top-down institutional principle, isn't it? Is it right? You bring people together with resources, and you bring people together with authorities and statutory authorities that can help, and you do that in that sort of cross-pollination way that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm a cooperationalist. It's about as many different groups getting together from across the political spectrum and social and civic society groups and getting them working together. It's not about just the environment or just social. One of the other things we say on the Climate Emergency Centre Network is, that the environmental and social crisis are interlinked in many ways, and we need to find the solutions to the environmental and social crisis together. And quite often when you go into communities, and I've worked in a lot of different communities all around London and around the country as well, that, you know, communities are 50 to 60% of the way, 70% of the way to having the ideas about the solutions and what they can do. But what they need is the physical space to meet, discuss, organise and work together. And the Climate Emergency Centres project is about building an alliance of groups in each town and city that works together. So actively outreaches, and from a small team building up to getting 4 or 5 or 6, 7 groups cooperating together on the space and reaching out actively to as many different diverse groups as possible.
No, I was going to say, so in the centres you've got, and you mentioned you've got 21 across the country. I mean, give us some examples of the sort of activities that happen there.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I went to the opening in an old William Hill betting shop of the Worthing Climate Emergency Centre the other day. They have talks and workshops. They had all sorts of great displays, had a big LED TV showing people, you know, the effects of climate change. But, you know, there was a table about rewilding. There was lots of tables of leaflets and information. They had the local mayor down for the opening. It was very supportive. But in the different centres, I mean, each one is autonomous and independent, so they do vary. And in different areas, there are different flavours and different groups and how organised they are, or more affluent areas or whatever it is. But there's things like talks, workshops, meetings. There's open mic nights. There's craft markets, upcycle, recycle markets. There's sorry, repair cafes. For instance, the Swindon Centre, they do a second-hand kind of craft market. They've had lots of exhibitions, International Women's Day, all different groups and stuff. They collected donations, I think, for Ukraine early on, and within about 2 months, they'd filled 12 transit vans full of equipment to send out there. But yeah, each one varies, you know, things from bike repair to, you know, all manner of talks and workshops on everything from renewable energy to home, particularly with the cost of living crisis, or the cost of greed crisis, or the cost of large energy companies overcharging us crisis, shall we say. There's been lots of talks by groups about saving money and your heating and energy awareness and that kind of thing. So, you know, really it's kind of it's an open space for as many different talks and workshops as groups want to do, particularly about the environment and community issues.
So how do you actually start getting a centre together? I mean, do you get a centre and then try and get groups to come in, or do you get groups together first of all who are interested and then find a centre? Is it a chicken and egg? How does it work?
Okay, so a lot of it's outlined in this handbook I wrote from 30 years of setting up eco centres. I during lockdown wrote how to set up a climate emergency centre in 10 steps. And it kind of begins with, you know, chapter 1, what chapter 2 is about getting a team together. There's a really short little 4-minute video on the climateemergencycentre.co.uk website. If you have a look on the front page there, very lovely animation. But it basically takes you through the steps of gathering a team of people. And that can be as simple as getting 4, 5, 6, 7 friends together and getting an idea of what you would like to do, writing some ideas down on paper, doing the paperwork, getting a 1-pager together. And then slowly you form into working groups. So one for outreach to the council, one for looking for buildings, one for getting a legal entity set up like a charity or not-for-profit company. What we have done, we did a lot of Zooms during lockdown and after to help new groups set up. So if a group, you know, from Cardiff to Coventry gets in touch and says, we'd like to do this, we've got 5 or 6 friends, we would then come and do a Zoom. We go through a slide presentation for about half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, and then there's questions. And during that Zoom, hopefully that group of 5 or 6 or 7 friends has reached out to whatever it is, you know, environment groups, women's groups, community groups, various different ones, student groups. And so in that meeting, there is then 10, 12, 15, sometimes 20 or 25 alliance of different groups that start to come together. So the Swindon example is fantastic. They said we've only got about 4 environment groups in Swindon, but we've got 20 or 30 plus lots and lots of community groups, and it really is a very well used community hub of lots of different groups that's helping refugee groups to pensions groups or whatever it is. So yeah, that's the process basically. Have a look at the handbook, get a group of friends together, write some paperwork up. We could come and do a Zoom for you to explain the process, and then you become part of a network. We have a Telegram group, we have a Facebook group. People can ask questions, share documents, share skills. We meet every Wednesday for a Zoom, but we can help and support groups all along the way.
You, of course, you now got one in Cockfosters here in the London Borough of Enfield. How did that come about? How did you get that, and how is that progressing?
So we got that through talking with, you gradually make more relationships with property owners and property developers and friends of theirs and things. So that came through another group we work with and they said this building was available. And so it usually takes a month or two, couple of months really to negotiate a meanwhile lease. So that's what we operate a lot of these buildings on. That says that you look after a property in the meanwhile for the 1 to 3 years before it's something else happens with it. They rent it out or it's developed or whatever. So this one came about. We were offered this space, and our charity spacegenerators.org was interested, so we negotiated getting this space. It's actually transitioned between a couple of different owners. So the first owner was Pearl and Coots, which is the Queen's Bank, and they own a lot of properties. So we looked after it for them for 4 months and did a lot of fixing the place up, preparing, and it's quite a complex building because it used to be a data storage centre. And then it's transitioned over to some new owners. So we've been talking to them and working with the great guys from NCAF, Enfield Climate Action Forum, and what's been great is NCAF already has this alliance of 110 or 120 civic and environment groups. So there's a ready-made alliance here. So we've been doing a lot of work to prepare the building, get ready. We're hoping we can open in the next while. There's been quite a lot of complexities because of the nature of the logistics of the building with data storage and stuff, but hopefully final pieces in place soon and we can open up and start having talks, workshops, activities of all different sorts. And every community can see empty buildings, and we need to get these spaces activated. It's good for the local community, it's good for the council. It's a win-win-win situation, we call it, because it's a win for the property owner. They save some funds on the business rates. It's a win for the council. 300 councils declared climate emergency, but they don't always have the funds or the capacity to do as much as they'd like. So you work together with them, and then it's a win for the local community because suddenly, 20, 30 rooms can become available for talks, workshops, meetings, social entrepreneur, eco projects, that kind of thing.
You mentioned working with NCAP, Enfield Climate Action Forum. How valuable is that to work with an organisation which has a very wide network in place?
That is fantastic because it takes a while to build up connections in different areas. A lot of these groups we go to different areas and we work with all different sorts of groups over the decades, but a lot of these groups are setting up in their local town and they know local groups and local people, but it still takes time when you have a meeting and you get a physical meeting when the centres start opening up and you've got 10, 15 groups there. Half of the groups maybe knew of the other half groups in town, but not all of them. And suddenly, I didn't realise we had a bike repair workshop. I didn't realise we had a vegan cafe. I didn't realise we had, this women's campaign group or whatever these things are. So I call it kind of like the mycelium, a mushroom. Sometimes mushrooms underground are like 3 miles long. And all we see is the little mushroom that pops up the top. And these centres are like that. They pop up and then suddenly you find this massive upwelling underground of many different groups across that city or town. And NCAF's already done that hard work for the past few years. Hats off, amazing to NCAF and all the hard work that people have put in. Francis, yourself, I know, and lots of other dedicated team. But you've got an alliance there. You could tell us and tell the viewers more, but 110, 120 groups all across the whole diversity group. So it's really great to be able to work with NCAF because you've got strong connections in the borough and lots of groups who would like to use space. So it's been easier for us to present to the council and to the owners to say, look at all these amazing groups that need space. Let's get this space for a longer time and make things happen.
Well, you talk about space, and space you certainly have. You've got 4 buildings, don't you? I mean, not 4 buildings, but 4 stories in the Metro building in Cockfosters. I mean, how can they be used? What do you have there that, the community can be a part of?
Well, we're hoping, once we get the final things in place for opening, that there's a big ground floor is just for storage, but the first floor is a massive, great big long, 250-foot long white hall that could be used for art gallery, exhibitions, talks, workshops, conferences. We've had a salsa dance class group come in that would like to do dance classes, something for young people, something for all ages mixing together. We had some of the guys you brought in, the co-op outreach workers. They work with a lot of different youth and other groups, and they were saying, we've got 3 different youth groups that would like to come in. They actually wanted to use the whole floor themselves, and we said it has to be multiple use, lots of groups can use it, but they're working with they mentioned 3 different youth groups. One of them was the Youth Parliament, which I thought was amazing. So, that I'm not sure exactly the age range, but under 25s or something. So you could have a youth parliament coming in there with 300-400 people debating policies that young people would put in and recommending that to the older parliament, should we say. Further up from the first floor, there's a big kind of workshop space that could be used for making theatre sets and repairing and making repair shop. We're very big on recycle, reuse, making and creating things and upcycling. Then on the next floor up, there's a big kind of open plan office with 4 smaller offices that could be used, different groups and projects. But again, that's carpeted, it's more comfortable, and we've got a little cinema space down the end with 16 seats, and could be used for cinemas, talks, workshops, conferences, anything that a local community group would like to book it out for a talk for 20 people or a conference for 300. We do everything on sliding scale. So groups with less money pay less, groups with more money can pay more, and then on the top floor, there is a kind of big office, but it's got lots of desks. So they could be used by many, kind of hot desk kind of thing, by many different groups who could come and use them. Again, we try and do everything reasonable rates. There's a media training lab. So there's 10 computers there. We're hoping to do training on green job skills and green transition and fix that. There's a group from Addis Ababa College. They want to train youth in London and any age in London about animation, but also they're linked with a college in Ethiopia and a school in Ghana. And then we've got a kind of hack lab, which would be for repairing and fixing computers. Then we've got a boardroom that could be hired out, by the hour, by the day, by different groups to have a meeting or a presentation.
And you forgot the podcasting studio. You're going to podcast as well, aren't you?
Yeah, get you in. Any budding podcasters out there, we would like to provide a platform. There's a nice podcast studio there with a green screen and microphones and stuff. And you just made me think of the last one. There is a rooftop. We don't have access. We don't have people go up there, but it would be lovely to have solar panels up there and run the whole space on renewable energy. I think we had a conversation earlier about the Green Garden group. What was the transition?
Energy Garden. Energy Garden, yeah. And looking at how you can work with, railway stations and grow flowers and vegetables, but also have solar panels on the roof as well. And we said we might look into that because we've got people interested in that. But you do have that ambition, don't you, to become a net zero building if you can?
Well, we've reached out through your good self and others and emailed the Enfield cabinet members who are responsible for bringing in net zero. I think the target's 2040. I've had some sustainable architects in here who could do a redrawing of how this could be run like that. I mean, it's still in a process with the owners, and we have to see how long we get this space for. We would like to get spaces for at least 3, 4, 5 years. the dream would be that we could be given a building that we could just get on with for a long time. Maybe through the shorter term buildings, we can raise money on longer ones. But yeah, anything we can do to build towards net zero is great. There is one of the first exhibitions we want to do here is an eco solutions exhibition. So there would be examples of solutions in housing, energy, agriculture, transport, green architecture. And one of the architects who's been in specializes in zero waste buildings. So how do we create that? It would be lovely to run this building completely on renewable energy if we had it for long enough. Solar power, I've got some bike generators out there, some vertical access windmills maybe on the roof. And there's these new generator things, wobble poles. They kind of wobble back and forth 10 degrees, and that generates energy in the wind.
Yeah. I mean, when you get people in who are interested in things like that about buildings and so on, do you hope that you can not just, get people to learn about it, but you can then sort of roll that out to the community and you can get people doing projects as a result of what you've been inspiring people to do?
Absolutely, definitely. We've talked. There's an NCAF energy group, community energy group, could come here as well as a waste group coming and doing stuff. If we can have practical working examples of these things, I mean, these spaces always for the 30 years I've seen them as motherships for many other projects. And however amount of time we get them, people meet, people have conversations during events. I had one guy run up to me at an event 10 years ago, and he said, "Oh, you put on that event, and we had a conversation on now. I've got a solar panel renewable energy company and I'm doing this," and that only happened because I met a guy in the cafe and talked to that event, So we do hope that it cross-pollinates, that if people can come and see wind, solar, energy solutions of various, hand generators, bike generators, whatever it is here, and community energy generation, microgrids, whatever it is, that can spread out to other projects around Enfield. And I'm sure there's great projects already doing stuff like that in Enfield already that we can showcase and show to others and help to join the dots. And yeah.
I mean, I can see you used to go to Glastonbury and we're into science fiction, because this whole idea of a mothership sounds like it comes straight from there, and it's really quite. I mean, it's an idea that will sort of resonate with people, so it's great. But I mean, do you ever feel frustrated that because of the way you work, sometimes you don't stay in a place long enough, and that you're hoping to stay there and something happens and you can't? I mean, you have to be always on the move, don't you?
Yes, I do feel frustrated, but you have to keep up the indomitable spirit of perseverance and keep going. I would like to see our governments, our councils, and property owners have a frank conversation about changing the policy on vacant property in the UK. We're trying to draft policies at the moment that would go to various of the political parties so that these spaces are used. I think one of the most progressive groups is the Green Party's got a policy on vacant building reuse. It should be standard that we can all see tons of empty buildings in all of our communities, that they are offered. We did manage to get something into the London plan of Sadiq Khan's version, I think. Well, it might have been Boris at that point, but that property developers are advised that they should let buildings be used on a meanwhile basis. But that means 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. And your question there was about permanence. I'd like to see this really valued. I think we need to be on a wartime footing. My dad was in the Marines. My mum was a nurse. Very practical. I'm grandson of 2 Dublin fire station masters. As Greta Thunberg says, our house is on fire. We need to deal with this in a really important way, and realise that we need to allocate spaces to be used as climate emergency centres, as climate solution centres, as building community resilience networks for the storms of climate change that are coming. I've been involved with the environmental movement for 30 years, and it's really full on the tipping point we are reaching now. Ice shelves melting to, permafrost melting and more CO2 going up, and, rising water levels. It is going to get worse. And we need to focus on the solutions. And to do that, we need these spaces long term. We don't just need them for 1, 2, 3 years. We need buildings to be allocated by government, by council, to work on solutions, to share resources, to focus on building community resilient networks. And it frustrates me that this is not treated in a serious enough way by our government, by councils. Councils are good people trying to do things at all different levels, but we are in the middle of a climate crisis, and massive climate storms are coming, and we really need to deal with this on an adult and a global level, that we actually take action and give these spaces permanently to whole networks to work on the solutions. And it does frustrate me, yes. But you've got to have hope, and you've got to keep going, and hopefully somebody gives a building long term.
No, you have to. And I hope you're in Cockfosters for a long time. But is that something that you and what you're doing and what we're doing in NCAF can work together on? And that's making people aware that we are in a wartime type experience. We're in war against climate change, and it's hard to see it. You don't get shooting, you don't get enemies coming at you, and so you don't quite see it the same way. Do you think together we can make a difference by getting people to realize that we are close to those tipping points, and we really do have to take this more seriously than we have in the past?
Absolutely. I think what gets me the most is that we've been researching our network solutions since the Copenhagen Climate Summit, whatever that was, 10, 12 years ago. And there are thousands of solutions out there. There are thousands of projects and people and groups working on what we need to be doing: renewable energy, permaculture, community energy grids, community currencies, all sorts of things. And we need a mobilization of all levels of our society to work together, to cooperate, from landowners and property owners to government, to councils, to grassroots groups and initiatives. And, we can pull together and we can make a difference. And every single thing we do now makes a difference for our grandchildren and for our children. And when I started in the environmental movement back in the 90s, we thought climate change was something off in the future. And now we're seeing, the springs and the summers and the winters all getting messed up. And we're seeing floods like a third of Pakistan underwater, massive changes coming. And it's affecting here. It isn't, climate change isn't just something that's happening somewhere else to some other people. I think a wake-up call a year or two ago was 4-foot high water pouring down Stratford Tube in London, and there was another one in West London as well. These floods are coming, and they're coming fast. From Oxford to Scotland to all around the country is beginning to be seriously affected by climate change, and we can make a difference by getting together and working on the solutions. Every single thing we do, if we all got out, planted trees, planted hemp, planted kelp, that would all absorb CO2 in a massive way. But we need that level of everyone working together.
Okay, so you're doing all this, and that's great. And if anybody, because we come to the end of the 30 minutes now, but if anybody wanted to find out about what you're doing in any of your centres, but particularly in the Cockfosters one, how would they do that? Where would they go?
Okay, so first port call is check out climateemergencycentre.co.uk, and that's the website. And on there is an email. You can contact us, climateec@gmail.com. So that's climate, 2 E's in the middle, climateec@gmail.com. And if you want to talk to Space Generators, our charity, more specifically about Cockfosters, our email is spacegenerators with an S on the end @gmail.com. We're not fully open yet. We're waiting for the final few bits of logistical stuff to be sorted out, but you can email us, or you can contact us, and you can arrange a visit to have a look at what we're doing and see how we can work with your group to make some things happen as soon as we're open.
Okay, no, that's great. And I mean, we'll do what we have been doing, and that's trying to get people to know about you, more and more people, and involving them into podcasting and all the things that you're doing. And I mean, I think it's great because to have that, as you said, to have a building there that you can bring people together is a real resource. And so what you and your colleagues have been doing, I think, has been amazing. And I think it will excite a lot of people to get more involved, and hopefully as a result we can get the climate emergency agenda much more into the foresight of people in Enfield and in all the areas that you work in. So, thank you for doing this webinar. Thank you for telling us about all the work you do. And I hope we'll be cooperating together a lot in the future. So thank you, Peter. That's great.
I really hope that, people check the website out, get in touch with us. There's always a team of dedicated volunteers helping, but we always need more help. And, you may know someone around the country. Have a look on the map on climateemergencycentre.co.uk. We've also got a Facebook, Climate Emergency Centres. But have a look at the map. There may be a group in your hometown, wherever you're watching, that's trying to get a centre together or already has a centre. There's 21 physical centres now following this model, and there's another 20 odd teams working to get a building. So let's get those spaces open and get working on the solutions and get the community together and build the resilient networks. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you. And, we'll end this webinar now.